Okay, we ready to go? Yep. Hi, everyone. I used to do this funny thing to get people to be quiet. I haven't done it for a couple of years. I'd just go shh, 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 and then I'd wait, and then I'd find someone who was talking. I'd get them to come down the front, and we'd sing a song together. But that was too cruel for everyone, particularly because I sang along. You know, maybe we should reinstitute that. Who thinks we should reinstitute that? Yes. I'm just tricking you into putting up your hand. Now you've got to come down. No, I'm joking. Well done for being prepared to do it. Another trick I used to do was I'd say, if I couldn't get enough volunteers for something, I'd say, put up your hand if you'd like the person next to you to come down. And then the double trick was, who did I get to come down? The person who put their hand up. Yeah. Oh, it's fun being a lecturer. Okay, so here we are, week 8, the end of week 8. The project's out, and you're all now in the flurry of doing the project. So let me start off by talking about the project a little bit, because I'm sure it's on everyone's mind. I'd like to just discharge some thoughts about that. So, first of all, it's been quite amazing the amount of work people have been doing. I'd say 2/3 of the course or more started a diary within a day of the project coming out, and most of them had good thoughts about the project. So that was fantastic to see. As you know, the first phase is due on Sunday, and it's a group programming thing. And in order to be able to do that, you need to be able to program to an interface. So this week in your tutes, you're all designing interfaces. And I've seen the interfaces as they've been going up, and they're looking really good, and they're fantastic, so that's good. Now, obviously, we've got this problem that the people who are later in the week get more time to plan and think about their interface. And we have the problem that the people in the early part of the week will have a crappier interface, have more time to code it. So we'll have a well-coded crappy interface or a poorly coded brilliant interface. That's the dilemma we've got. But actually, you'll all sort it out. The amount of coding shouldn't be too big, and the complexity of the interface isn't too hard. And all the early interfaces are looking great. So if that's an indication for the quality of the interfaces we're going to produce, that's good. But there is one problem. And those watching the forum this morning have seen that problem already, and there's been a bit of discussion about it. So let me approach this problem by saying what our objective for the project is, why we've set the project the way we have, and what we want you to get out of it. The project has, as with all our projects, with all the things we do, we have multiple objectives in everything we do, because there's not enough time to have one assessment task for each thing we want to do. So this task we want you to think about is about group work. There's a bit of group work in there. We want you to operate as a group. It's about more autonomy. Really, we leave, unlike the first two ones where we gave you lots of help, in this one we're expecting you guys to sort stuff out for yourself. So it's about you trying things yourself. Maybe they won't be perfect, but they're your ideas rather than ours, and that's fantastic. And that's hopefully a confidence builder. It's about applying all the unit testing stuff that you've learnt already, and applying all the interface stuff that you learnt already in task 2. Instead of us giving it to you, like we did in task 2, now you do it yourself. And you'll have all these vested, they'll all be, if we've got it right, your objectives will line up with ours, and it'll be massively in your interest to do good unit tests, and it'll be massively in your interest to have a good interface. So they're all objectives. But we have some other objectives, and they are, one, specifically, we want you to think about the issue of what goes into an interface. In a first year course, perhaps this is slightly unusual. In a first year course, normally we give you the interface and the students program using the interface. Yeah, well, in fact, there's 3 different sort of levels of difficulty. One is we give you the interface and you implement it. That's sort of the easiest. 2 is we give you the interface and you use it. So we give you an implementation and the interface and you use it. You can do much more sophisticated things with this. This is quite trivial, but this is a whole lot of programming, it's a whole lot of thinking. And 3, the hardest thing, which you normally wouldn't see in first year, you normally wouldn't see till second or possibly even third year, is you design the interface yourself. So in this project, we actually sort of want you to do all 3, which is quite bold. We want you to design the interface, and then we want you to implement it, and then we want you to use it. Now, because you're the designer, the implementer, and the user, you've got all these advantages that don't occur in the real world in these situations. Normally, these 3 jobs are done by different people. And the people using it are really annoyed at the design they're given. And the people implementing it are really annoyed at the design they're given. And the people using it are really annoyed by the crappy implementation. So everyone's cross with everyone else because no one has any control over the other parts. But in this one, you guys sort of have full control over all of the parts. But to make it slightly more realistic and simulate the real thing a bit more closely, we are trying to constrain you slightly. So we want you to, when you're doing these different steps, as you go through them, you'll do 3, 1, 2 is the sequence you're going to go through. We want you to imagine you're 3 different people in each of these stages. So number 1, you design it, you're doing that in your tute. We want you to imagine you're just abstractly designing it, you're never going to use it, it's just for someone else, so on and so on. And then when you implement it, we want to pretend that you didn't design it, that it's something you were given, and you have no idea how it's going to be used, or you know roughly how it's going to be used, and you know about the design, but when you use it, we're going to assume that you didn't do either of these 2 things here. Now, because you can do all 3, you can do sneaky stuff. You can start to think, which we don't it's not quite in the spirit of the thing. You could think, oh, I'll design some things because I can think of a crazy thing I'd like to do when I ultimately use it. I'd really like to know how many queens Blackadder has passed. Because I've worked out, if I know how many queens Blackadder has passed at the beginning of the game, I know everything, I can solve it. So you insist that this goes in your interface. And everyone else in your tute has an equally crazy idea. Let's say they're all my ideas, hundreds of copies of me in tutes. We have equally crazy ideas, and we could design an absurd interface putting a whole lot of stuff that the end users really want. This is like designed by the market, and it can end up into a bit of a mess. Also, if you're implementing it and using it, you can put some sneaky stuff in it. Like you could do stuff that your interface could work out, your implementation could work out when it's being used by you, and when it's being used by you, it cheats and gives you extra information. And when it's being used by someone else, it lies to them and breaks them. And then when we share them all at the end, it's all passing around. Anyone that gets yours, they've just like got a time bomb. Yeah? That's sort of cool. You could do that, and you can do all sorts of other things. But the one, we sort of don't want you to do that, and that's against the spirit, and we'll try and detect that if it happens, but I think we've sort of set it up so that won't happen. But one thing that you can do is this, and we don't want you to do this. You can think, I'm not going to trust the implementers. The implementers are going to be my team. I don't trust my team, and I don't really trust anyone on my tute. The only person in this whole world I trust is... Richard. It's a dangerous... I don't trust me. You can trust Marvin. You can't trust anyone except yourself. So you're thinking, what I'm going to do is, I'm actually not going to use the ADT. My tute's going to go away and they're going to code a whole lot of ADTs and make all these ADTs. Pathetic earthlings. I'll let them do their puny work, and then when it comes to running my player, I'll say, oh yeah, sure, give me your ADT. And I'll throw it in the bin and ignore it. And I'll write my own little ADT inside my player, and it's my world, and I'm controlling every aspect of it. Nothing can go wrong. So it's like the control freak way. But really, this goes against the whole idea of ADT design. The whole idea of ADT design is when jobs get big enough, they're too big for one person to do, and we want to see how we can have multiple people working on it and fit together and everything still work. Now, this job isn't so big that one person couldn't do it. If you wanted to burn your candle at both ends for the next 3 weeks, you could do everything all yourself, and that'd be fine. So in theory, you could sidestep the ADT thing together, and we don't want people to do that. So here's how you'd sidestep it, and here's the rule that I didn't explain very clearly before, and I apologise for that, and I'm now trying to explain clearly in this lecture. What you could do is you could say, our ADT has this function, and it has this function, and it has this function, and it has... And these are all the ones that the earthlings are putting in, and you're just laughing. Earthlings. And then at the end you say, oh, by the way, I'd just like one more little function, please. Just one for me. I'd like a function that gives back the initial string that was passed into the ADT. Because, of course, with that initial string, you know everything the ADT knows. You can ignore the ADT and completely write your own thing. So we sort of said that. We didn't want you to do an end run around the ADT. We didn't want it to return a string. But then some people, quite sensibly, not really knowing what I was getting at, said, oh, well, we should have a function then that says, I want to know exactly what happened at each instant in the history. So I'd like to know what cards were played in turn 1, and what cards were played in turn 2, and what cards were played in turn 3, what cards were played in 4. Now, obviously, if you had that information and you put it inside a little loop, you could generate that string again in 1 split second. That's what we call like doing an end run around the ADT. Now, we don't want you to do that, so how we're stopping it is we're saying you can't do that, which is a draconian restriction on you guys. We're saying, no, your ADT cannot give out enough information that it makes itself redundant. There has to be some loss of information from the ADT. It provides lots of helpful information, but it can't be used by someone to reconstruct the original string. We didn't have to do it that way. A better way of doing it, and David pointed this out, and lots of other people have probably thought it, a better way of doing it would be just to say you can do whatever you want in the ADT, and then we scrutinise everyone's code really closely at the end to make sure no one's done something sneaky in the code. But that's a bit more subjective. You don't know what's happening until you've handed the final thing in. And also, we won't have time to do that because you'll be handing it in with like a week or two to go, and your tutors aren't going to have enough time to scrutinise closely all the code of all the people. There's just not enough time to do that. So the rule we've got is your ADT cannot return enough information to reconstruct the original string. Now, because I didn't say that very clearly originally, I just said something like, can't do an end run around the ADT, you can't like return the original string to the person can't get hold of the string. I don't know how I said it, but you might quite reasonably have thought, oh, I can't return the string, but if I return something equivalent to the string, that's okay. But no, it's not. So some of you will have already submitted ADTs that can do that. And some of you will not have submitted ADTs that can't do it, depending on if your tutor worked out what I was trying to get at. Very cryptically, in the way I said it. So, if you've already submitted an ADT and it has this uber power to reconstruct everything, you have two choices. You can leave it exactly like it is, and that's fine, and code it exactly like it is, and that's fine. But when it goes from the uDesign to the uImplement, uDesign, uImplement, you can leave it exactly like it is, but when we go to the last step, confusingly here called step 2, when you start to use it, we'll actually not give you that ADT. The tutor and I will go through and randomly change it in some way so you can't get all the information out. So you're welcome to code it and do it exactly as it is, but your player will not get enough functionality. We'll cripple it in some small way. Now, if you don't want us to do that because you think, oh no, that's a real pain, I want to start programming my player now, I don't want to wait till Sunday to find out exactly what the ADT looks like, then you guys just go back and self-cripple yourself slightly. Now, it's easy to do. What you can't do is return exactly what happened every single move of the game. But actually, you don't really need that. Less information is possible because of the way we've set the game up. Everyone that's playing is playing anonymously. So when you're in a game and your player's in a game and playing 3 other players, your player actually has no way of knowing which players those 3 are. So it can't respond to them strategy-wise. It can't think, oh, I watched his last night and I know he's got this one vulnerability. If you play this, he'll always do that. Because I'm not exactly sure it's you. If we knew who the people were, then knowing the whole playlist would let us, we could reverse engineer, knowing their strategy, we could catch them, but we don't know their strategy. And the amount of information you're given in the history is so short, there's not enough time to work out someone's strategy. You don't get to watch game after game after game. You just get to watch one game of like 10 moves. Yeah?
What that means, though, is that you can't develop probabilities based on what people are doing.
Oh, no, it doesn't mean you can't develop probabilities on what people are doing. What it does mean is if you want to use probabilities based on what people are doing, where does that functionality belong?
But if you have no way of tracking what people have done on a set of moves, only
Yes.
on the most recent, or
Yes.
then you can only judge based on what's in your hand and what was last played.
Let me have a look here. I mean, that's actually not as bad. It sounds terrible. If that was true, it would be a disaster. That's not right for a couple of reasons. Let me show you one of them to start with. We'll get to the other ones later on, because that's something else I wanted to say. I want to make a decision based on probability, but I can't get enough info. Hypothetical problem number 1. This is like Dear Abby. Dear Abby, I met a boy last week. I want to make a decision based on probability, but I can't get enough information. Should I tell him? Okay, and then we'd write back. Dear Desperate. Dear Desperate. Dear Incomputable. Dear Desperate. I don't understand why you say you can't make a decision based on probability. Don't you have an oracle called Player View, which can tell you anything you want to ask it? Why don't you go back in time and put inside your ADT interface a function called tell me the bloody probability? Then the ADT can tell you that probability and you can make the decision. I hope it's true love. Good luck, Richard. Okay, so basically the story is all the information about the state of the game, any information your player's ever going to want to know, that information is stored and represented and calculated by one particular part of the program. Which part's that? The player view. That's what the player view is. I reckon the subtext of your question was, our player view is crap. I want to do things that the player view doesn't tell me information about. I want to do those calculations inside my player. I'd like to sort of bypass the ADT, get all the information I need about the plays and do the calcs myself, rather than having it as a function in the interface. Does that make sense? If you want to get information about the state of the game, the person to tell you that information is the player view. So if you want to know a probability like, what's the chance that the next person's going to play a 7 or has a 7 in their hand, assuming all other things being equal, what you need to know is the number of cards they have in their hand and the number of 7s uncounted for. They'd sound like two good functions to have in the ADT.
Okay, but the ADT can return the number of times a card's being played?
The ADT can return it whatever you want as long as you can't reproduce that initial string.
Okay, so as long as it's not in order, it can tell you all the cards.
Yeah, it can tell you all the cards that have been played as long as they're not in sequence. Yeah, no worries at all.
Great.
Yeah. Does that make sense? You can, yeah, you just shuffle it and you're in. And what I was going to say before you asked your question was, you don't, I've seen all those hands, so I'm going to go through them, but do keep them up because I won't remember all the people. You don't actually ever need literally to see the whole playlist because there's, I mean, there is a small amount of useful information from the whole playlist, but there's not much. At any given instant, you don't really have an assessment of anyone else's strategy. So at any given instant, you can just make some general guesses about what they're likely to do. And you just need to know what cards they've played, but you don't need to know when they've played their cards. You don't need to know, oh, he always plays a 6 after a 7 when he can, because you won't have enough of a sample space to work that out. You'll have only had 1 or 2 rounds, and then that's it. So you could even, it's absolutely fine to know the history of all the moves since the last thing was reset. That's fine. That doesn't let you reconstruct the entire string. So you could return all the moves that happened in the past after the last time there were 3 passes in a row. Yeah, that information's all fine. So we're not saying you can't return information, you have to be draconian about information. We're just saying you can't return all the information. Now I did think of a diabolical way you could return partial information and with 99% chance be sure it was perfect information and there was only a tiny chance it was imperfect. So if you're going to try and skate around the rules and hand in something you think technically isn't all the information, but with vanishingly small probability it is, do check with your tutor first, just to make sure they're not going to magically alter your ADT between steps 2 and 3. So just check anything you think is tricky past your tutor, but I don't think anyone's going to try and do tricky things. All the interfaces I've seen just need one small little tweak to them and they'll be perfect interfaces. Yep.
What if I want to know, like, what card is the highest card before a certain player is passing? Like, if I want to know what the highest card in their hand is, so when they've only got 1 card left, I know what to play. Like, that requires me going through the whole history.
No, it requires someone going through the whole history. Does it require you going through the whole history? No, who does it require to go through the whole history? Yeah, it's got to go through the whole history. There's one person that has the whole history. There's only one person that has the whole history. That's player view. So you've got to ask player view, what's the likely highest card that a player has? Yeah, that's a good function to put in your interface. And you'll argue that with the other people in the tute and they'll say, yeah, that's good, or no, that's crap, or what's the card the person played last before they passed for each player? Or what's the history of highest cards that person's ever played? Any of those things are legitimate interface functions.
But if even functions like that, the history of all the cards that the players play, like
Shh.
we've got,
Yep.
and we've got a big red thing at the top saying we've given you too much information.
If you've got a history of what every player has ever played in sequence, then you can reconstruct the original string. If it's, no, I just said then you could have a function that returned the highest card that person's ever played before passing every single time they're passed in the game. If that's a piece of information he really wants to know.
But if it's not in sequence, then it's not an issue because you can't reconstruct the full.
Well, even if that information was in sequence, it's still not an issue because if he's just returning the card before he passed, that's not a full string of cards.
But I'm saying if you have a history of every
If you had a history of every card played but it's not in sequence, that's fine. The litmus test is you can't reproduce the original string. You can have as much information as you want and be as general as you want. Being general is fantastic, but don't be so general that the player view is doing itself out of a job. Yes?
But if you had every card that everybody's ever played in sequence, but
Yes.
you didn't have passes, you could reconstruct the original string.
If you had every card that every player's ever played in sequence and you didn't have passes,
Like most of the time, you could
oh, there were no passes shown in there?
yeah,
Uh,
show where they pass.
yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so every card played by every player in sequence, but not showing passes and not tying the cards to particular players.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not time to
Not tying cards to particular players and every single one in sequence, but then you couldn't reveal information about what cards you yourself had played in the past. You might be able to cross-correlate those two pieces of information and synchronize everything up. Yeah, yeah. Look, if you're getting it so it's not useful and it's too complex to do and it's unlikely to be perfect, then it's probably fine. And just run it by your tutor and get them to say, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, yeah. Yes?
Wouldn't it be technically possible to combine different information to get the whole string?
Shh, shh, shh. If you have a really large number of functions that return lots of information, and you have lots of redundancy in your ADT, so lots of the functions that can be cross-correlated against each other, then yeah, in theory, you can reconstruct the original string and that's bad. And that's why the spec said your interface should have low redundancy. I mean, that's just a general thing for ADTs as well. So yeah, I mean, it's not just a case of if you break it into 5 pieces, overlapping pieces, that it's okay. But there's, you know, what do you, without giving away my interface, what you need to know seems not that great. You don't need to know a lot of stuff. I mean, you're probably now all doing the hang glider trick of thinking of some tiny little incremental improvement to the quality of your player that involves some enormously elaborate calculation you could do. And that's going to make like 1% difference. And really the thing is just to get the core of the thing right and working well. So, yeah, so don't just jump in and put in a really elaborate complex interface. And similarly, don't think, I want a really elaborate complex interface, but I don't want to convince other people to put it in. So I'm going to de facto build it myself by letting all the information leak out of here and letting me build it myself. Your interface is really the interface we expect you to use. And you have a chance to have some input into it. You really are 3 different people, but you're also one person. In this assignment, you have some chance to put some input into the interface you come up with. It won't be a perfect interface. It'll annoy you. No matter what you decide on in the interface, if it doesn't annoy you, we haven't done our job right. Because I don't think there's an interface in the world that isn't really annoying. And what we shouldn't do is let you design an interface, then let you make up for it because you've got a little backdoor. Because that's not what interfaces are. Interfaces are, I've got a really annoying set of constraints. What's the best possible player I can write giving those annoying constraints? Yes. What's that?
It is what happens in the real world.
It is what happens in the real world. What?
Work around the interface.
People work around the interface, yeah, but do we like that? No, we don't like that. So, real world, me not liking it. Yeah. Okay, yes?
Are all these elaborations more to do with strategy
These
than the basic functionality?
all the stuff I'm saying now should...
Like the probability and stuff like that, like I had in my head that they were quite, simple factual
Yes.
rules-based things. Like when you go into like all those elaborate functions, is that more to do with strategy and...
Can I rephrase what I think your question is, and you tell me if I'm answering it right? At one point there I was hypothetically talking about some very elaborate functions you could put here. Those functions were, if you had some desperate complex strategy you wanted to do over here and you worked out, I really need some elaborate functions. But I'm hoping no one's going to do that. I'm hoping we're going to have some simple functions here and players that use those simple functions to do it.
Kind of just based on the rules.
Based on the rules of the game. So I'm hoping here, if people want to fool around with probabilities, they don't write a function here to calculate every probability under the sun, because that's really depressing. But you return a few numbers, because a probability is just one number divided by another number. So you return a lot of numbers here that you can divide in whatever ways you want. You return some summary of some interesting numbers. Yeah? How many cards have been played? How many cards has each person played? How many cards have I played? How many cards are left? What's in my hand now? How many sevens have been played in the course of the game? Somehow you need to get that sort of information to be able to have probabilities. But you don't need the whole history to get that. That's a summary of the history. From those probabilities, you can't actually go back and work out the original string. There's many games with those same probabilities. Yes?
Can you return all the cards that haven't been played?
Yeah, you can return all the cards that haven't been played, sure. Sure. If you return all the cards that haven't been played, that's just telling you the cards that have been played, but it's not putting them in sequence. All the cards that have been played not in sequence is absolutely fine piece of information to know. Now, look, I'm seeing lots of frowning faces, and I hope that's because I'm just making you think about the project and you're starting to think, oh, bloody hell, this project, oh, will it never end? Is there just complication after complication? And I hope it's not because you're thinking, oh no, nothing's going to work now Richard said that. Is there anyone that's got something they desperately need to know, or they need me to reassure them in some way that this isn't desperately bad? This is just a constraint of the problem. It's absolutely fine. The only problem really is that some people on Tuesday have legitimately, and possibly Prashant's tute this morning, have legitimately already come up with an interface, and at least one of them, they've got a problem function that they'll have to tweak. So Alex North is coming here at the end of today's lecture to see his tute just quickly if you want to have a chat with him, and he'll make some suggestions about how to change it. Thurston's up the back and he's happy to chat with his tute. So you guys might want to catch him during the break and have a quick chat. Yes? Tim's here as well. What time were you? You last night? Tuesday 15. Tim's here as well, and do you want to chat to them in the break? Is there anyone that's not here? Put up your hand if you're not here. Okay, me too, that's right, I wish I'd done that. Well done, guys. You get 2 points for quick thinking. Okay, now, why did I bring along the alien? This is the grand prize. The person that wins the comp. Look, there will be people in this course that get very high marks. And there will be people that win all sorts of awards at uni and all sorts of stuff like that. And, you know, who cares about them? Because there will be one person that wins this. Okay, that's really cool. All right. Now, let's everyone just mutter amongst yourselves quickly, just to sort of recharge you, and then I'll resume the lecture in 5 minutes. Did someone need this? 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 Is that for you? No. Yes.
I need to ask a question. Okay,
Yeah.
it says you can't